Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Susan Welton, Oracle Marketing Manager at Perficient, and I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar, Driving Digital Transformation with Oracle Procurement Cloud. We're very fortunate to have the Director of our ERP Cloud practice on the call today. He'll provide a brief overview of Perficient, and then he's going to jump right into a live demo. So I'm really excited to share that news today that we do have a live demo. When we first crafted the invite, we weren't quite sure if we would be able to do that, but we are definitely doing a live demo, so please get ready for a great tour of the product. Two questions often come up with our online events. Can I get a copy of the slides, and can I get a link to the recording? And the answer to both questions is yes. We will email you with that information on how to access both the slides and the recording following today's event. Time permitting, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the event, so please type your questions into the chat box, and feel free to do that at any time. Given that this is a live demo, I expect that you will have questions that arise during the actual demo that's ongoing. So please do go ahead and take the opportunity to put your questions into the chat window, and we'll address those when we get to Q&A. But it's helpful that you can go ahead and capture what your thoughts were at the time that the demo is taking place. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Matt Bukowski. Matt is Director of Perficient's ERP Cloud practice. He has 18 years of experience in Oracle financial applications, which includes 5 large-scale global full-cycle implementations across multiple industries and multiple countries in Europe and Latin America, plus upgrades across many Oracle EBS releases. Matt, welcome.
Hey, Susan. Thanks a lot. This is Matt Bukowski live from Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida. So we're going to take you through our slides here, and let me get clicked on that. Okay. The slides are not quite advancing, or is there a delay, Susan? There we go. Okay, good. Thank you. So we have a full agenda today. We're going to, of course, walk through Perficient's profile, tell you a bit about who we are. Then we're going to go through some slides and walk right into a live demonstration. We're going to talk about some of the key. First, we're going to demonstrate the actual application itself, but then we're going to take you into some of the key setups, the things that make those things actually work. We're going to generate requisitions through the purchase order. We're going to do receipts and walk through the accounting processes. So I'm going to advance again there. Sorry, there is a little bit of a delay between the slides. We'll go to About Perficient. Perficient is a public corporation, roughly about $500 million in revenue. About 3,000 employees worldwide. We do have a lot of onshore resources here in the United States, all throughout the country, Northeast, Southeast, centralized in Dallas and the Houston area, as well as we do have our global delivery center. One of the things we do like to stress is that we have a 95% repeat business rate. So people use us, and then they keep coming back more and more. So we love our return customers. A little bit of our practice overview. We do just about everything Oracle in the EPM world. So I'm the ERP director for cloud. We do BI, fix in the cloud, customer experience, the CX modules. Of course, on-prem EBS work is our legacy. So jumping into Procure-to-Pay, I want to talk about some of the new things that we have found in the cloud. First of all, we do have our own instance of the cloud software installed. We are on release 13, so we have the latest and greatest, and in fact, we've received a major update a couple of weeks ago. So I believe we're even on version C at this point. Oracle is no longer really releasing numbers. In other words, it's not going to be release 14. It's release 13 is the last formal release, and then they're going to do A, B, C, D by year, by quarter. So one of the new things we found in release 13, and probably in previous releases, however, is that cost management is kind of the underlying driver between inventory, procurement, and payables. That is to say that inventory and procurement no longer really have their own close process, which was always something that in EBS has always been kind of a stickler. Inventory had its own close, procurement had its own close. Of course, payables has its own close and still does have its own close, but it does interface information from payables back into costing. So everything between procurement, receiving, inventory, it's all now in one place where you can do all of your close, reconciliation, and accounting processes. So it makes it much more streamlined and very convenient. Some of the key differences that I found between eBusiness Suite and the cloud are highlighted here. One is that in EBS, expenses related to purchasing, expense receipts, they all flow through the purchasing module. So it's kind of a convoluted month-end process where you would accrue your expenses from the purchasing side and then jump over to the inventory side and run your costing processes there, and then run over to cost management and run create accounting. Now in cloud, everything, inventory and expense, it's all through the costing module. Second thing is in EBS, purchasing and inventory, it did have their own period close. I just talked about that. In cloud, ERP, the costing module controls all periods for both of those modules. Third point, in EBS, the accrual reconciliation process was performed in purchasing, and people are always kind of confused between the purchasing process and the inventory process. Again, in cloud, all reconciliations are centralized and much easier to work. A lot of on-screen dashboards that help you with the reconciliation process, and of course, you can always go back and run reports. So receipts and payables invoices are transferred into the costing module. Any period-end accruals are performed in the cost module that was previously done in procurement. We have live dashboards that allow management by exception. Those simply did not exist in EBS. Everything was a report, and there were many reports and many processes to run. I think you'll find it much more streamlined here. The last point is all accounting is defined in what's called the TAD, the Transaction Accounting Definition, and Subledger Accounting Rules. In EBS, all the accounts were defined directly in inventories, sub-inventories, and category definitions. In Cloud ERP, it's all centralized in Subledger Accounting and in this concept called the Transaction Accounting Definition. So now we've had some intros here. Just wanted to ask a polling question. If you can all answer, which version of ERP Cloud are you currently running? 11, 12, 13, or not on cloud? And we will move on to the next question, although it looks like mostly everyone's answered that. And thank you for those answers. The next question is, if you're not on cloud, what is your time frame for cloud implementation, assuming you're even looking at it? Next 90 days, next 6 months, post 1 year, or you just simply have no plans to move to cloud? Okay, I think looks like most people have answered that at this point, so we'll go ahead and move along. Thanks again for those answers. And now we're going to pop into a live demonstration. This is probably going to take about somewhere between 25 and 40 minutes to get through. It could go a little quicker than we think. So we're going to jump right in. And what you're looking at here, whoops, I got to share my screen. Sorry about that. I'm not looking at anything yet. All right, now it should be up on the screen. I'll give that a couple of seconds. What you're looking at here is Perficient's live environment. We have just about all the modules enabled in some way, shape, or form, and today we are going to focus down in the procurement area. So in procurement, you have many different sub-areas. You have requisitions, agreements, purchase orders, receipts, catalogs, and suppliers, all accessible immediately from this menu without having to log out, log back in, change responsibilities, or what have you. And all of this is roles-based. We're going to dive into the purchase requisition. And what you're going to see is very friendly, almost in a sense like an Amazon shopping experience. You can see your previously approved requisitions on the left. What's really nice is it shows all the things you've recently purchased down the center of your screen, and you can scroll through. So there's many ways to buy from the home screen. You can either you can shop by category, and I have it broken down between aircraft, computers, and office supplies. So those are some of the main categories. Or you can pick items that you've recently purchased, right? Or you can go to your shopping list, and you can look at your weekly shopping list. So this is on a shopping list, things that you'd buy maybe every single week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just walk through a purchase requisition process just to show you how easy that is. And I'm going to go ahead and right now I have nothing in my basket up to the right, you can see. I'm going to go in and add some paper. And all I have to do is click on the shopping cart and it starts to add it to my basket. I'm going to add ink, pencils, computer, a phone, and I can actually go and even order. I'm going to go switch over to shop by category, and let's order a 757-200. So as you can see, I can buy everything from expense type items to inventory to heavy equipment. And in the end, when I'm done clicking all those buttons, I can go to my shopping cart and click review. And some of the things I want to show you on here, first of all, it lists everything that I bought, the quantities, the prices, the extended amounts, the total. And all of this comes from, it's all been on an approved supplier list, or it's a blanket purchase agreement. So a lot of these things the vendor is known. When it goes through, it's going to go right through and become a purchase order. Some of the things I'd like to show you are that one is that it changes the charge account for every single different category that's on here. So for example, we have paper, and then if I switch over to look at the laptop, the account that has been generated is more of a fixed asset type account, 17101, versus an airplane, which is going to an inventory account, 120101. The other thing that I wanted to show you on the screen is that you can change your destination type. For example, for inventory, I can purchase inventory and direct it to a sub-inventory. So when I receive it, it's going to go right to that spot. Or I can change it to expense. So I can have a mix and match on here. I can have both inventory and expense items on the same requisition. I can have different, obviously you all know from EBS or whatever system you're on, makes sense that a requisition, some of these things go across different suppliers. So most of these things are from like an Office Depot. Got a couple of cell phones or a cell phone on here that might come from a cell phone store versus an airplane, which may come from Boeing. So a wide range on one single requisition. The other thing I can do if I go back and shop is I might say, you know what, there was one thing on there that I really want. It's not in my catalog. I can do a non-catalog request. And maybe what I need that I realize I'm out of are things like gel pens. And when you do a non-catalog request, you have a little bit more work to do. You don't really have to fill in a supplier or anything. That's pretty much it. Just say that it's goods, what it is, what the category would most likely map to. Click add to cart, and it's added to the cart. That simple. So I can go back to the cart. Sorry about that. Again, kind of go through one last review. And when I'm done, I think I got everything. I can look at the approvals, take a quick look at that. And what I can see is who it's going to. Now, all of mine are set up for self-approval. One thing to note is that you can, if you'd like a manager to look at it or another coworker, you can click add and you can add an approver name into the system so it will go to that person. Otherwise, I would save it and submit it. And with that submission, it's going to now show you that the requisition is pending approval. It's usually pretty quick. I'm just going to kind of refresh my screen here. And it's already approved. So it's already been through the system. Right now it's generating a purchase order, but I want to show you what it looks like now that it's approved. I'm going to go back to that requisition. And there's some, notice there's no purchase order yet. That's because the system is actually still generating the PO through workflow. Some things that you should see is that it picked up the agreement number and the agreement line number that an item belongs to. For my gel pens, there is no agreement. That was a non-catalog request. You can click on the life cycle of a particular line item, and it will show you more or less what stages that this particular purchase order has been through. So as you progress through receiving it, when the purchase order gets created, it will show up here. When you receive it, the receipts will show up here, and when you invoice it, it'll show up at the bottom. So you can review the complete life cycle. Anyone who enters a requisition, if they're not sure if someone's calling for payment, at least they can see, for example, right here, that in fact that an invoice has been received and what the paid amount would be at the end. And we're just going to go in there one more time, see if we got a purchase order number just yet. Okay, now we have a purchase order. Actually, we have multiple purchase order numbers generated, so the system is moving along as we expect. The reason we have 3 different purchase orders is because we have, even 4 different purchase orders, is because we have 4 different vendors on this particular requisition, and one with no purchase order number because no one knows where that's going just yet. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to the next stage in the cycle. We're going to go look at the purchase order. Actually, sorry, I didn't grab the number. We'll go look at purchase order 37. And we have 34, 36, and 35 out there. So we'll look at PO 37, and I can click on it and look at it right from here. All right, this is a basic picture of the purchase order. Tells us what we bought, who it's coming from. Fact is that it's open, and it did all of this automatically because A, I am the approver, and B, it knows who the supplier is. We're going to go look at this again from the purchase order screen. And the reason we're coming here is because I want you to see the dashboards. You can see there's a lot of information out here. It tells me that from a few days ago, I had some requisitions that actually failed the automatic creation. And these failed because they actually were over and above the agreed upon amount. Since then, I have fixed that, and if I were to resubmit these, they would go through successfully. It tells me how many requisition lines I have action to take, and how many, in the red here, how many requisition lines are past due, way past due over 14 days, and some of these are just brand new. Let's go look at these requisition lines. We can just click on it. It takes us straight to it. And here at the very top, we have the gel pens, and I can select multiple things on this screen and click Add to Document Builder so that these will now get a purchase order. Through the Document Builder, you can very quickly create a purchase order. If you like to reference an agreement, you can do that. Otherwise, we'll just put in a supplier and click OK. And over to the right-hand side of my screen, it starts to build out essentially what is another shopping cart. From here, I can click Create. And as a buyer, I've just procured items that someone is requesting in the field. All right, it's telling me purchase order number 38 was created. I'm going to save it and view the PDF. Okay, there's the PDF. Took a minute there to download. At this point, it is still in draft status because it's not been formally submitted and approved. So this is a standard Oracle template. Of course, through BI, you can customize these templates to look how you'd want them to look. I'm going to go ahead and submit the purchase order. And that's been submitted for approval. That should approve pretty quickly. So while that's in approval, while that's going out for approval, I'm going to go ahead to the next step in the process, and I'm going to go do receipts. So you'll notice that receipts is part of my role. Not everyone has to have access to receipts, but it is part of my role. Presumably, if people are expecting office supplies, you'd want to allow them to receive them so that, of course, payables can pay them as soon as they come in. I'm going to go ahead and search for my requisitions or my purchase order number. We know we have PO 37 out there. And here's what we've got. Purchase order 37, requisition 68. What we can do is we can highlight these items. I'll highlight 2 out of 3 and say that those 2 out of 3 came in, and simply click the receive button. Now, it comes up as a blind receipt. We don't enforce blind receipts. That just simply means I can't see the quantities and I have to count what's in my hand to put it in there. I'm going to click show the receipt quantity, and it shows that we had expected 5 reams of paper, one box of ink. I'm going to go ahead and just receive 2 reams of paper, and I'm going to submit that. Effectively, that receipt is now created, and that is done. So if we were to go back and just real briefly go back to purchase order, or rather requisition 68 here, we should now find that ream of paper if we click on the life cycle. That this receipt now shows up, right? The purchase order shows up, and the receipt shows up, and when the invoice comes in, that'll show up at the bottom. So when you're looking at a life cycle, you can drill into the receipt. You can look up receipt information, pretty much whatever you need to know. One thing that I found great about the cloud versus EBS is you can drill to anywhere, almost from anywhere, providing that you have no security restrictions. All right, so the next step in the process is that there are some concurrent processes that need to run to move all of this information into costing. So we'll go into monitor processes, and I've added that to my favorite. This is like in EBS, view my requests, similar to that. You can schedule a new request right from here. These are all processes, of course, that you can schedule. So one of the processes that we have to run is transfer receiving to costing. We'll go ahead and run that. And as I go into the costing module, there's a receipt accounting button there. Brings up this dashboard. It shows us, earlier when I was talking about the accruals, we can talk a little bit about this now. We don't have to wait for those things to finish. It shows us, if you have an accountant trying to reconcile your accruals, what they can see here is what has been received but not invoiced. So here we have anything on this screen has at least been received but not necessarily been invoiced just yet. Here we have partially invoiced items. When you pick any one of these items, you can review the distributions. Let me show you the options here on the screen. You can review receipt accounting distributions. Find some stuff out there. So for example, you can pick an item, it tells you the purchase order. If you scroll over to the right, it'll tell you what it was that was purchased. And then at the bottom, you can see the activity, and if the accounting was run, you can see the accounting right from this screen. And it shows you every stage of the accounting, so it shows you all the ins and outs when it came in, that it went to, kind of flows through inspection, even though you might not have inspection enabled, it just flows right through. And then ultimately goes to an accrual account. Now I I have Accrue on receipt enabled for both expenses and inventory, which I just think is the easier way to do things. It avoids a whole other process at the end of the month. So when you go into payables, it just reverses that accrual account. We're actually going to go over to payables now and invoice purchase order number 37. There's payables right there. And creating invoices is very easy to do in the cloud. Just like everywhere else, you do get a dashboard. You can see the recent invoices that were created. You can see what is due. You can toggle this to, what's due in 30 days, what's due in 7 days. These info tiles, you can define other info tiles as to what you can see, what's on the dashboards. You can see what holds you have out there in the system. Right? And all of these screens are actionable in some way. So you could simply click the release button, for example, and it would take you to release the invoice from the hold. Let's go ahead and create an invoice. And I can very simply key in the PO number. And it's going to default all of my information, pretty much except my invoice number and an amount. And I'm not really sure what the amount is. We'll put in something for now. So we're going to go ahead and match. These are the three things I can match against. It tells me I've ordered one is available, and here I've ordered 5, and 2 are received. So 5 are available to be received. 2 have been received. I'm going to go ahead and invoice just match to this one, and I'm going to invoice just the 2 of them. Actually, I'm going to invoice one of the 2. So the total will be $399. All right. The next action you do is you validate the invoice. Actually, let's save it first, and then we'll validate it. All right, that invoice is validated, and we're going to go ahead and post it to the ledger. Okay, accounting is complete, and that pretty much ends the accounts payable portion of it. The next step is to transfer these costs over to the costing module. So there's another concurrent process that we run. And this one is called transfer costs to cost management. So these are the actual payables costs for the accrual. So what that does is it centralizes all the data in one place. Okay, while that is running, we're going to go back and look at the life cycle of the requisition. And as you can see, now I've got the order, I've got the receipt, and I've got the invoice. And the invoice tells me what the unpaid amount is or if it's paid. For people that have to deal with vendors, very quickly they can see the information from their own desktop without calling the accounts payable department. So a lot of information is available to the end users immediately without making phone calls, makes the system very efficient. Okay, back over to the costing module. Let's see if our To make our item show up, we do have to run create receipt distributions. One more process that you need to run. And when that finishes, we don't have to wait for that. There's going to, we've got a lot of pre-baked data out here for you. As I was showing you this before, it will eventually show up here. It'll show up as a partial accrual because I did invoice part of it. So let's see, do I have any examples? Here's an example where something is, partially invoiced, and it's still out there as an accrual, right? So I've got an accrued amount. I've received $71,910, but I've only invoiced $79.90, so that accrual remains out there. So to summarize, that takes you through more or less the full P2P process, all the way from a requisition through a purchase order, through the invoice and how it all ties together back through costing. All your tools are within the costing workbench. And what I'd like to show you lastly are the setups. How did we make all of this happen? So I'm going to navigate into setup and maintenance, look at the procurement module setups, and take you into the procurement transaction account rules. This is the first thing. We're going to look at what's called the TAD, the transaction account definitions. And as you can see, we created a custom TAD based off of the default TAD. They call it the purchasing tab default accounting. You basically copy that, it becomes your own. And within here, we said, hey, for the charge account, set your natural account to this rule. So we now have to look at what's behind that rule. It's called PFT_REQ. That basically says, go get the account number off of the item category. So let's go look to see how that is linked up. And that is done in the account rules. So in account rules, we've defined this rule, PFT_REQ. And what we're saying is to look at the map, very simply, look at a mapping set called Purchasing Natural Account for Transaction Account Builder. This is a seeded rule. If you don't create this rule, though, what it does is it defaults to the employee's expense account for like expense reporting or whatever. So that might not be applicable, especially if they can order many things. So we switch it to go pick the account from the category. So now that is set up like that, the next thing you would do would be to go into the mapping sets, which is the next item here, and we set the rules under this particular mapping rule. And as you can see, what we did was we defined our categories and the GL account that matches to each one. So that's the simple magic behind picking an account by category. There's a little bit more to it than that. Lastly, you would have to hook up that rule to your subledger accounting option for your particular ledger. And we'll look at procurement, purchasing, and look at the accounting options. So up here, Oracle comes seated with the standard purchasing tab default accounting. If you leave it that way, you're going to get all of the default accounting. Once you make all those previous definitions that I created, the mapping rules and the accounting rule, you can assign that to your subledger accounting rule, and that becomes law. Next thing we'll look at are the purchasing categories, because you have to define the categories in order to make them work. And in here, I'll drill down. These are all the categories I've created. And if you double click on a category, it shows all of the items assigned to a particular category. Next thing we'll look at are catalogs. And from the task menu, we'll look at managing the catalog category hierarchy. This is kind of important because this actually dictates how you'll see things on the screen. So for example, under aircraft, I have aerospace. Aerospace is the actual category. Aircraft is like the browsing category. Computers, we have cell phones and we have comps. Under office supplies, we have office. So keep this screen in mind. When you flip over to the requisition, what are you actually seeing when you look at the categories? You're seeing aircraft, computers, and office supplies. And underneath those, you're seeing aerospace, right? Cell phones, comps. So it's the same layout here. That's what makes that work, right? Under catalogs, just to kind of refresh what that looked like, this is what you see on the purchasing requisition screen. So you have to assign a purchasing category into like a browsing category. So this is what you want users to see. The next thing we'll look at is the content zone. And what really is a content zone? A content zone brings together all of your catalogs that you've built. You can theoretically could have put all these into one big catalog. We made a different catalog almost mapping it to a category. And it tells you which of these catalogs are assigned or where the groups of people that are allowed to see these catalogs. So at the bottom of the screen you have access to say, or availability to say, which requisitioning business unit can see these catalogs. You can secure it by a particular worker. You can secure it to a particular requisitioning business unit, or you can just say it's available to everyone, and that's the option that we chose for this demonstration. The next thing we want to look at is the actual catalogs themselves. So we built four catalogs here. And in a catalog, you can name it how you want to name it. You can choose to include items from specific agreements. And we have so I've assigned agreement number 4. And if we wanted to look at that agreement, we could see it from here. This agreement has available to it 2 particular items. We can also indicate what categories that we want to include on this. So an agreement may have multiple categories on it. We can further indicate what categories of items that we want to see in this particular catalog. So that really narrows down the things that people see. So all of these things that I'm showing you combined, put together, equal what a user will see on the purchase requisition screen. So without all of those setups, none of these things actually show up. And lastly, we'll take a quick look at the purchase agreements themselves. So we'll go ahead and look at agreement number 4. In an agreement, it's what you would expect. You can set a total agreement amount, the total units that you might purchase. It will tell you what has been released to date. It'll tell you the status of the agreement, the payment terms, shipping methods, any kind of notes and attachments. And at the bottom of the agreement, it'll show you the actual items. Now, some of you might be wondering, how did I get the pictures to appear on the purchase requisition? That is actually done through the agreement. If I go to edit the agreement, I can get access to the line items. And it's in here that you can very simply attach a thumbnail image through a URL, right? So presumably you need a public a space, maybe on a SharePoint, that has public access where the cloud application can reach into and grab that picture. Any changes that you make any change would constitute a change order, whether it's a purchase order or an agreement, and it would submit it back through for approval, and it would track that history of those particular changes. So that concludes the live part of the demonstration, the live part of the webinar. Susan, I would open it back to you, turn it back to you for any questions, and I can always go back to the system if any questions come up related to the application.
That's great. Thanks, Matt, for doing that. As Matt mentioned, we're now going to start the Q&A portion of today's event. So essentially what you need to do is type your question in the Q&A tab, which you should see in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. This is where you actually type your question in for Matt. We've had a couple questions that did come in throughout the demonstration, but if you didn't have an opportunity to do that, go ahead and take this time to jot those questions down, and I will be reading them out loud for Matt. So I will go ahead and get started with the first one that we've got here, Matt. Wanted to know, this is John. He is asking, what were the biggest challenges in implementing the purchasing process?
Okay, that's a good question. So everything in cloud is pretty new. To me, some of the biggest challenges, and I've done this before in EBS, so it's in a way it's kind of harder when you've already done it in EBS, kind of transferring that over to the cloud. You have to know what you're looking for, but I think the fact that everything moves centralized into the subledger accounting definitions. So for example, when you're setting up inventory organizations, we used to just put all the GL codes directly on the inventory org. And we used to put all the GL codes directly on the sub-inventory orgs, for example. But in the cloud, one of the things I was showing earlier was that it's all customized. It's all a subledger accounting rule. It's all a mapping rule. So when I was in procurement, for example, and I was looking at the transaction account rules, you have to really go through all of your mapping sets to define your accounting for each one and make sure you don't miss one. If you miss one, you're going to get an error in the application somewhere along the way. So, for example, here we define for the expense accrual account that for all organizations, it should go to this one accrual account. Well, that used to be defined in purchasing or financial options or somewhere in the receiving options of an inventory org. That is now all done here. So I think that was one of the major things to kind of to get over that hurdle, is to understand the movement, where everything moved to. So good question.
Matt, it looks like we have a couple of questions here from Sarah. The first one is this the standard UI? Can it be customized? That's our first question.
Okay. So the standard UI, generically speaking, the UI I look at is, all of this is the UI. This is customized. This is not the way that it looked when I got it. There are ways to change the color schemes, the logos, general kind of look and feel. You can move where the banner sits. If Sarah is referring to the UI in here, this is standard. The only, custom, I guess, piece of it is that I'm able to add the pictures in. That's loosely speaking custom. I really wouldn't say that that's a true customization, obviously. But I've not found any place to make this look any different.
Okay,
Good
great.
question.
The second question from Sarah is, do you have AP imaging?
We own it. It's a good question, Sarah. We own it, but we have not yet implemented it. As far as internally, we've implemented it at clients, but I don't have it internally to demonstrate at this. It's not configured internally to demonstrate at this point.
We've got a question here from Dinesh. Dinesh wants to know, can we do punch-outs? For example, sending punch-out to Staples.
Absolutely, yeah, good question. So being in our own internal environment, it's difficult to set those things up because we're not going to run and make contracts for those things. But absolutely, you can define punch-outs to Staples, Office Depot, any of the standard Oracle punch-outs, and you'll just be looking directly into their catalogs. So similar idea to this. You'll do a punch-out. It'll generally go through the same flow, right? It'll create the requisition, create the purchase orders, but it's on the onus. The onus is on the company Office Depots of the world to maintain their catalogs for you.
We've got a follow-on question from Dinesh as well. He wants to know, can we have multiple level approval process, for example, cost center or by budget?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the approval rules are, I'll describe as flexible as they ever were. There's probably more seeded out of the box. You can do many different levels. You can route it by the cost center. You can route it by the purchasing category. You can do it by both. You can, crisscross and overlap and pretty much do whatever you want with that. So it's definitely doable.
Okay, it looks to me like I'm surprised that we've addressed all the questions already. They're out there. We certainly have a good amount of people on the line for Q&A, so if you have a question, please send it now for Matt. Otherwise, we're going to let you go a little bit early and we'll move on. So I'll just give it here just another minute to see if another question comes through. In the meantime, Matt, while I'm waiting to see if there's any other questions that come through, I do want to remind folks that Perficient has a very active Oracle blog. If you haven't had an opportunity to check it out yet, please do look for the blog online. It's a great resource. You will find many blog posts authored by Matt directly, as well as other folks in the ERP practice. So please do take an opportunity to check that out. Looks like we have another question here that came in from Ryan. Ryan wants to know, how long does a typical migration to Procurement Cloud take from on-premise? That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I think it depends on how you define typical and what else all your dependencies are. I mean, if you're doing what I just showed you, which is kind of a basic, I'll call it mostly an indirect spend model. I did show you some inventory. If you're doing indirect spend, you're probably looking at, maybe 60 to 90 days. Again, do you have punch outs? Do you have any existing customizations that you need to review? I think doing a readiness assessment is something that, you can do, should do, and we can help you with. But that answer is going to vary. For some clients, it could be 3 months. For other clients, it could be, 6 or 9 months, just depending on how deep they go.
So Matt, it looks like we have one last question here. This one is from Michael. Michael wants to know if there's an option to be able to have a demo delivered to a particular company. So if his company is interested in a demo, would you be open to do that, or how is that done?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. So Susan, I mean, I'm guessing there's a way that they can channel in through one of our PSs or sales reps but yeah, we can do that. It would be helpful. Be more specific to your company. We do a little discovery call, maybe 30 minutes, find out the key things that you're looking for, so we can configure our system, even with your logos, to make a better demonstration event. So we can definitely bring you the demos. No issue with that. We own, and I don't know if you're looking particularly, Mike, at procurement. We own order management, procurement, all the financials. We get into manufacturing as well. So with probably a few days business notice, we can definitely do a demo for you.
That's great. Thanks for the answer to that question, Matt. It looks like we've addressed all the questions that have come in, so I'm just going to remind folks once again to follow Perficient online. As I mentioned previously, we have our very active Oracle blog where you can find out and research past blog posts by Matt himself, as well as many other folks on the Oracle team. And if you're interested in the Oracle Essbase topic, we've got an event coming up here next month, November 14th, which is an Oracle Essbase in the Cloud event. We're very happy to have a customer on that call with us, Mercer Advisors, and he'll be walking us through his decision process to move to Oracle Essbase in the Cloud, and the success and the rewards that they feel they've reaped from the Oracle solution. And we have an event coming up in January. If you're going to Modern Supply Chain Experience, we will be there. So please reach out to us and let us know that you're going. Love to meet up with you there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close today's event. I want to say thank you to Matt for this wonderful demo that you provided us with today. And thank you to all of our attendees online, and we hope to see you online in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This does conclude today's conference. We appreciate your participation, and you may now disconnect.